you cannot outgrow your systems. So if you want to grow beyond where you are and you keep hitting a wall, look at your systems. And if you do not understand your systems, hire the people that do. It's the systems and it's the people to drive the systems that will break any level of stagnation in any business, including law firms.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at Law Firm Growth Ideas. We're talking today about Freedom Framework for Small Law Firms with Janelle Sam, MBA. Today we'll be talking about how to help your law firm grow, and Janelle's going to go into clarity on where your firm sits on the freedom scale, the operational gaps keeping you stuck on daily work, how to reduce owner dependency without slowing growth, creating action plans that are executable. Janelle has a tremendous background helping law firms in this specific area, and we're very grateful to have her here. So thank you so much. And Janelle and Rob, why don't you take it away?
I'm Rav Mandirata, and I run Social Squares, where we help attorneys aim higher. And AIM stands for AI and marketing. But today's discussion is not about either of them, so I'm off the hook. But I'm truly excited to introduce our speaker today, Janelle. Janelle Sam, like Joe said, she's a seasoned operations expert, and she's created this cool framework called the Freedom Framework, which is a system that helps law firm owners reclaim time, boost productivity, and reduce owner dependency through strong operational systems. Janelle holds an MBA from Cornell and was also recognized as a top 50 women leader in Houston in 2022 by Women We Admire. She has over 20 years of experience guiding business growth as a fractional CEO in the legal industry, helping hundreds of firms grow profitably, including results as high as 135% growth just in 2 quarters. She's currently head of business strategy and operations at Seabrook Law Offices, which is a San Jose-based family law firm. Janelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rav. Really, I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. So before we dive into the Freedom Framework and tactics, I would love to ground everyone in your story. I mean, you started as an operations expert, and then you moved to litigation consulting, and now you're advising CEOs and doing operations work as well. So help us understand how you got to here, and how does that help you diagnose issues in firms?
Well, Rob, I actually started off in the investment banking world. And by that, not as an investment banker, but I worked with a company that would go on site to these major investment banks in New York City, and we would take over and manage everything that wasn't directly generating revenue. So that would be the operations, right? All of the support staff, all of the facilities, the mailroom, everything. That's where I started. So I would be the one on site managing this for companies like Bain & Co., one of the big consulting firms, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America Securities, the investment banking side. And so this is where I got my start. And while I was there, I had the name, I was the fixer, because each of these banks were an account, right, for this business. And whenever we were running into trouble with an account, they'd send me on site. So I would take over what was going on, and I had to quickly diagnose where the breakdown was, what the issues was, to get that back aligned and profitable, and making sure that the relationship with the bank was sustained. And so that is really where I started getting my feet into the technicalities of operations. Now, that got disrupted when the market crashed. I'm dating myself, right? I was just talking to someone the other day. I'm like, oh my God, I still remember being all freaked out by Y2K. And of course, my kids have no idea what that is. And anybody who wasn't around there have no idea what that is, and the trauma that it incurred when we thought everything in the world was going to come to a stop when we went from 1999 to 2000. I was at Goldman Sachs at the time. So it's just like, oh my God, I go way back. But when the market crashed back in 2008, literally everything kind of got shuttered, including the role that I had then. And I took a little bit of a gap and decided to spend some time being a full-time parent to my two young daughters. And when I reemerged into the workplace, I actually ended up on the legal side. So the company I had worked for during those years actually did both investment banking, the financial side, and law firms as well. But it was the same, we followed the same patterns of management. So when I came into the legal side, I actually entered through the litigation consulting arm, meaning I was working for a litigation consulting firm, working with big law firms on huge cases, like global cases, huge cases. And the role I had wasn't as much operational as it was people, meaning I had to find the person who knew the expert, the subject matter expert who can give expert testimony in courts like the WTC, the World Trade Commission, the ITC is what I should call the International Trade Center, which is where global national interests were protected against global companies in the US. So these were top of the top. So my role was to find the unfindable, right? Finding people who aren't looking for opportunities because they're such experts in their field. And I think that skill combined with the operational experience I had kind of honed that in, that when I decided to go back to business school and to grad school and really hone this. And I decided to stay in the legal field, that those two skills it was a perfect blend, because a large part of what I do is people. You can have systems, but if you don't have the right people to run those systems, if you miss the mark, you will actually end up with chaos. And so one of those things that I do use in how I work today, it's okay, if you're getting more complex as a business, as a firm, right? What are you utilizing the systems that you have? Are you identifying the right problems? And do you have the right people in place to help you solve them?
Right. That's very, very interesting and a very unique background, from investment banking to operations to litigation consulting and now legal business running. So that's very unique, and I love the fact that the learnings you got from analyzing all that data, you're applying it with people as well, because that was one of the topics our last speaker touched on, because they brought in CTO, which is rare in law firms, and you touched on that as well. And that brings me to my next question: that is there a big gap in attorneys adopting technology, or even if they buy licenses to tools like Clio or Filewine or another AI tool, are they able to leverage those tools to their real capacity?
This is a huge problem. It's a huge problem because in working with the firms that I've worked with over the years, when an attorney decides, I'm going to go on my own and start my own firm, they purchase tools that they have already been exposed to. So if they started off with Clio, most likely they're going to buy Clio because that's what they know, or they might take a chance and try a competing product. But the challenge is, attorneys went to law school. Law school doesn't teach business. Even when you do business law, it's not teaching you the business of law. It's literally teaching you contracts, right? And so the software, the technology stack within many businesses are severely underutilized, severely. They're using it for the basic things that need to be done. So for example, Clio, almost every firm that uses it, they're using it to put, if it's an hourly bill firm, they're using it to generate the invoices in order to bill their clients. If it's a contingency firm, they may have the client files in there, but they're not really fully utilizing it for reports and forecasting. They just have the client files in there because they get paid at the end. They don't even use it for managing time, efficiency, and forecasting. If it's a flat fee firm, same thing. And they are missing out on those key benefits from the technology that they've purchased to make better decisions to help them scale in a way that's profitable. And this was something so interesting because Clio had reached out to me not too long ago And they weren't trying to sell anything. They wanted to have a conversation. They said, hey, you guys are like a super user of our software. Like you're utilizing Clio the way in the way it's built to be used. Right now, today I'm speaking about Clio, but just if you're using something different and you're listening to this, I will say that this is probably similar across even competing products. But let's just go with Clio. Clio has the ability to let you see into the business without you needing to be physically in the business. And what do I mean by that? If the fields, the customized fields are being used, you can run reports. This allowed me, like I had to do that where I am working with Seabrook Law Offices. When I first started, I couldn't see into the business. Here was this multi-million-dollar firm. Clio was being used, but Clio wasn't being used in the way it was meant to be used. And so by putting in some of the structures that's needed, for example, activities. If you're using activities, it shouldn't be everybody decides what an activity is. An activity is a group of actions that you're taking. It should be streamlined. And then if everyone's doing that, we have protocols for it. So when I run reports, I can quickly see where the time is being spent. So I'll use an example of how that actually helped us identify the root cause of a problem that was plaguing the firm. Clients kept complaining that, they didn't want to pay the bill. And so internally, everyone's like, oh, they just didn't want to pay the bill. They just want work for free. And the client's like, no, that's not right. You're just overcharging me. And so there was this disconnect. And so I decided to look into what is actually happening. So when I first tried to look, I couldn't look because there was like over 70 different categories. Everybody was doing their own thing. I couldn't see anything. I'm like, all right, we need order. We are going to group the activities into 15 specific categories, whether it's client communication, outbound communication. Let's put it, and everyone's going to use the very same categories. Just that simple change alone allowed me to then export the data from Clio into Excel. It allows you to do that. And the raw data allowed me to create a pivot table, which allowed me to see where everyone was spending their time firm-wide. Not just firm-wide, but by user or by matter. I could sort it however I want. And we had a huge problem. We realized that every time an email entered this firm, everybody was entering time for being copied on that email. So if the client sent the email to the attorney and the paralegal and the legal assistant, everybody put because they received the email. So what ended up happening was the bill was a little bit more inflated than it needed to be.
I'm sure.
But no one saw that as a problem, because if you just have an invoice and you're just looking at an invoice, right, it doesn't seem very apparent as a problem. And it doesn't seem pervasive unless you look at every invoice for every client that the firm has had. But if you're using Clio in the way that it's meant to be used, you don't need to look at every invoice. You just look at the entries, and it's a simple report that gives you data. Now you can see the problem. Now, guess what? Now that the data is literally showing you what this looks like, we can turn around and say, okay, we're going to change the protocol within the office about who gets the bill for an email. What does not get charged to the client? That simple change, we had a literal, like almost overnight stop in the client complaints and an almost overnight improvement in positive reviews.
That's amazing.
Simply because we started to utilize Clio in the way that it needs. And Clio is a software that integrates with other software. So let's just use Outlook. It integrates with Outlook. Emails can be automatically synced. So we're tracking client data. Microsoft as a platform, if you have the right people, so we talk about, you said like chief technology officer. Within a business, the attorney that started the firm is not the person who's going to get into and realize that this is the level of information that could be extracted from something that they're already paying for. It requires somebody who actually has that technical know-how, who understands what needs to be done to facilitate that in the business. So there's always a gap, because one, the awareness that this could be done has to be with the attorney, and it's not there because Clio is so robust that when they're selling it, even if they give everything to the attorney, only a little bit is sinking in at that moment, at that point of sale when it's being sold. And then it's not thought about of, and it's not really needed until the firm starts to get more complex and bigger. But by that time, you're so used to using the software in a certain way, it almost doesn't even cross your mind that there's more that could be done with the software that you've had for a few years.
That's very interesting and so fundamental in many ways. Can you tell us how do you approach this root cause analysis, and what do you typically end up finding?
To help to figure out what the root cause of any problem is, first of all, the pain has to be strong enough that they're willing to sit and listen. And the way I answer this question will probably answer Joe's question in the chat, which is, what does it look like to help attorneys understand the need to improve business acumen? Business acumen means that you have honed in the skills to identify problems quickly, accurately, right? And being able to solve them. And how do you get to the bottom of the course, to the bottom of whatever the issue is? So let's talk about what a common problem is. Leads, right? Every firm wants to get more clients in the door, and they want to do it as fast as possible. And it happens in a way where in this community, and I'm going to say community of attorneys, they're very competitive creatures, very, very, very competitive. And so what tends to happen in the community is that they are looking to increase leads because it kind of is it's a star on the chest compared to their colleagues with how many leads they're getting and how big the firm is growing. And there's a little bit of bragging rights that kind of go along with that. Now, that creates a little bit of a challenge, which is the focus then is on the growth. The focus is on getting new clients, hiring more attorneys, more clients, more attorneys, spending on marketing. The result that tends to come from that is you're spending more and more in marketing. Your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, keeps going up because of that need for wanting to get more clients. And not only that, you're hiring because you know you're going to be getting more clients. And so you become more complex because in order to spend more in marketing, you can't do it all. So you'll hire a marketing assistant and you'll hire a marketing director. And then, oh, wait, we need more intake because it's more calls. These are not roles that are directly generating revenue. And you're seeing this problem and they're thinking, hey, I want more leads, I'm getting more leads, but I have a problem. My marketing isn't working. Is it really that the marketing isn't working? Do you think the problem stems and sits only in marketing? You really think it's the ad copy, just the way you've written the ad copy, that's the problem and that's why it's not working? See, this is where business acumen comes in. Can you step back and look at the entire ecosystem of the business? Because everything is connected. It's like a body, right? It is like, I've told many attorneys that I've worked with, I said, you have to look at your law firm as almost like a person. It's just not alive and breathing. But when you now start, it's like a baby. It's like an infant. It needs your attention 24/7 because you think it's going to die. And then it starts to grow, but it's like a toddler. And you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole because it's like, you're just putting out fires, right? And then as it continues to mature, things kind of settle down. The behavior of the business does mimic that of a human system. And so when you see a problem, the problem isn't isolated to where it's presenting. It could be stemming from another part of the business. So let's use marketing. We're talking about marketing. You may have a problem with marketing. And you say marketing because many business owners don't know the difference between marketing and sales. They say marketing and sales, or they say marketing and use it interchangeably with sales. And I will say this for anyone who's listening, there is a difference. Marketing is all the actions that you do to let people know you exist. The minute that person contacts your business, that's when sales take over. It's those actions that after you've let them know that you exist, it's the actions you take to get them to buy or engage with you and your service or your product. That's sales. That's the differentiating line, even though they might be blurred, right?
Right.
So you may think the problem is sales. I'm just not converting. I'm not converting. I am bringing in all of these leads. And I will use an example of something where I actually had to deal with this. When someone comes to me and says, this is my problem, I say, thank you for telling me what the problem is. I will now go and find out what the true problem is. So if there is a problem in marketing, I have to look at the entire ecosystem. So one example of where there was the marketing, it was presenting in marketing, actually was operational. And why was that the case? The firm grew so quickly, so fast, hiring. And guess what happens when you're trying to hire attorneys? I don't know if anybody here has tried to hire attorneys. They are expensive, but they're worth it if they're good, right?
Right.
When you start off as a solo attorney, your rates are reflective of you, just you. And normally, very typically, it's low. Somebody who's now starting off, who is just in the hustle grind mode, will bill out. If it's an hourly bill, they'll do $250 an hour, $300 an hour, really, really, really low. Because it's just them. They might hire a paralegal, but there's no overhead. It's not complex. And it actually works because they're making money. They can eat, right? But now it's like, ooh, I'm getting more leads. Now I'm a big firm. I could hire. And now you have to pay somebody, depending on where you are. Now, if you're in California, attorneys are not cheap. You're lucky to get somebody for 120. And if it's 120, that's because it's a junior associate. The rates usually go up higher than that. Okay? So if you're hiring somebody, you have to pay their salary. And we know what the labor laws are like in California. You better make sure that payroll gets met. So guess what typically happens? You're not going to bill out because you don't have to set a salary for yourself when you're the one billing. But now you have a salary and you have to pay that salary. That billing needs to cover the cost of that salary when you do your billing and your collections. So that means you're going to raise your rates. It might go from 250, 300 to 300, 350. You might even go up to 400. You start to grow, the rates go higher because you're getting better cases and you're bringing in more staff. Guess what? Now you have more paralegals, you have intake, and you need to cover the cost. So your rates increase. But yet you think the problem in marketing sits at marketing. But then what gets forgotten is that when you started marketing, you built the whole client persona around the 250 rate when you were a solo attorney.
Right.
And you think it's a sales problem not converting because you are attracting people who could pay $250 and you're selling them $450 an hour.
Right.
So the problem isn't lying in just what was marketing. The problem was not paying attention to the ecosystem of the business and being proactive enough to say, before I do this, what changes do I need in order to prevent it from presenting as a problem in another part of the business? That's business acumen. That's business acumen. But that's not something an attorney would be thinking of, right? Unless they're getting that advice. The business acumen is saying you have to look at how each of parts of the business is impacting another part of the business based on the decision that's being made at that time. And that goes vice versa. You may actually have aligned marketing, bringing in the right type of client, but you're losing them. High client attrition. You hire them and they're like, thank you very much, I'm gone, right? And you're thinking, well, what is the problem? And you're thinking, it's my team, it's my team, it's my team. Guess what? It might be your team. You know what else it might be? How are you billing them? What about your intake? What about everybody else that's interacting with the client? See, whenever we have a problem, and this is also general, it's in life, but usually it shows up in business, there is a natural instinct to think that where the problem is presenting is where the problem is originating from. And that's not the case in many instances. Sometimes, but not so, right? And so, it's one of those things where it can get very frustrating, and it presents in different ways, in different businesses, which is why, folks end up misdiagnosing, or they're focusing on the wrong part of the business to fix a problem, right? And so how do you get that aligned and say, hey, I know you're looking over here because you're seeing the flame. And I'll say, look, it's like seeing a building burning. You see the flames over there, but guess what? The gas needs to be turned off. Pipes over here. Turn that off. The flames will go out. But instead, you're beating the flames, and the fuel is pumping into it, keeping the flames going no matter what you do. That's literally what happens in businesses. All right. And so, by coming in and seeing what's going on and giving them tools. And sometimes they just need the right people, or if they have the right people in the business who can help identify those problems, then the business runs better. So it kind of goes back to you need the people. You can have the systems, right? You can have the technology. You can have this great piece of software in your business that does X, Y, and Z, right? But if you're doing it and it's just the attorneys and you don't actually have the right person in the business to be like, let's optimize this, you're still going to fall back into making decisions based on what you're seeing in front of you and not because you understand the whole ecosystem of what's contributing to that problem. And that's a blind side, right? And that's why you need the right people in the business to help fix and drive some of those problems.
Right. That's very interesting. And I love the example you shared of how, as the business grows, how does your target audience change and how should your marketing change to accommodate for that? On the hourly rates, yesterday I was in a business networking meeting with a lot of attorneys there, and a crazy number was thrown around, $1,500 an hour. And I was like, who in their real minds would pay that kind of hourly? But
big law firms will charge that.
Right.
And they can, and they get it. But that's different. Big law is very, very different from a firm that's still trying to get established. Big law firms tend to be representing corporate clients or entities or governmental entities that have hundreds of millions or even billions at stake. So $1,500 an hour is worth the cost, right? If you're going to save my company $10 billion because of this lawsuit, right? Now, it may seem a little bit extreme, but in those circumstances, it actually is kind of worth it. Now, if you're a small law firm, right, and you're not your pricing has to be aligned for the market and the client that you're targeting. And you could be a small law firm with high rates, but you have to be really boutique, meaning like, let's say you're a family law firm and you're charging $1,500 an hour. It's because you're representing individuals who literally have conglomerates that are subjected to risk from this divorce, right? So the $1,500, it still plays the same role because they better be bringing that expertise in understanding how to navigate the division of complex businesses and assets and entanglements and trust and assets, and especially if it's global, because in many instances, there's a global impact to the divorce. So that $1,500 an hour may just work there. But we could go into pricing because many firms have no idea. They're guessing at their pricing. They're guessing, like pure guesswork.
That is definitely on my list to ask you. But before we come to that, let's talk about what we have in our session title, the Freedom Framework, which you've created. How does it differ from a typical EOS, or I'm sure Freedom Framework can sit within EOS or on top of EOS or other business operating systems? Tell us a little bit more about how does a framework work?
Yeah, I will share this diagram with you. So this is a matrix, right? That framework, it's not like, here is exactly what you need to do. The framework puts you into buckets, depending on what is happening in your firm. It could be any business, but we're talking here about law firms. Many firms, I would say, are here in this grind zone, right? High stress, low freedom. As the owner of the business, you're also working as an attorney. You're doing the work that generates revenue. And if you don't do it, the firm will actually collapse. But yet you have to make most of the decisions in the business. You're like the bottleneck. So you're stressed out, you're working. And so the focus, if you're in this particular zone, right, it's how do you build the systems to create predictability of what is happening and coming, and the accountability, the ownership within the business. If you're in the drift zone, right, your operations are stable, but you know that there could be more. It's just like it's floating. It's not going up, it's not going down. It's just meh, right? And that's also not a good place to want to be, because if you know it can do more, you just feel stuck into what that is, then the focus, if you're in that zone, would be how do you optimize profit for growth, and metrics, because the metrics help you optimize your profits. And that goes into time. It does touch into accountability a little bit, but what are those systems that's helping you see where opportunity costs are and where opportunities are in order for you to take the business from being met to, okay, now this P&L is having a movement in an upward direction. If you're in the golden cage, there are businesses like that, which is the money is coming in, but it's a house of cards.
Mm-hmm.
It's a house of cards. It is very lucrative,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't step away. You cannot step away. And so the focus here would be building a framework of leadership and delegation design, a system that allows that owner to step away from the business without it crumbling because they stepped away from it. Everyone wants to be in that green here, this freedom zone. That's why it's a matrix. Everyone wants to move. You can end up moving from the grind zone to the drift zone. You can move from the grind zone to the golden cage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're in the golden cage, it's a much shorter distance to get here into the freedom framework, right? But depending on how the decisions are made, you can be here in the golden cage, and then all of a sudden, it's like, it's not really growing. It's just holding, and you're back into the drift zone.
Hmm.
But everybody wants to come here where profit is aligned, because what's the point? What's the point of owning a business if you can't benefit the fruits of it?
Right.
You should be able to collect the profits, know what's going on, enjoy your life, choose the work you want to do if you're going to do work in the business, but you have time to work on the business and it's not overly taxing to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So the framework, this freedom framework that I've developed, puts awareness into where you are as an owner. And once you know where you are, it then tells you these are the areas that need to be prioritized within the business in order to get you out of where you are and into the quadrant that you want to be. And there's a free diagnostic. If you go to freedomframework.us, there's a free diagnostic that can be taken. And I actually do a web masterclass on this. It does go in a little bit in depth. It's like 2 hours. People are like, 2 hours, you do this? I've said, I do it. 2 hours, you might think that's a lot of free time, but not really when you realize how much more there is to it, that this is just giving you an overview of what more can be done and should be done to get you from this space of feeling very frustrated in what's happening in business. And I cover the different, because the framework is agnostic to the type of billing practice that you have. You could be hourly, contingency, you can be flat fee. There are firms who have different practice areas and they have a blend, right, of different practice areas, which has different billing models. So it's not about how you generate the revenue. It's about how the firm is structured and the freedom it gives you in the way you manage the business.
Interesting. That's a very interesting framework. And I mean, even if we take the first step on this webinar and the limited time we have, I think the first question which comes to my mind is that if I'm a solo attorney now trying to grow and adding people, how do I think about my hourly cost increase? What's the true cost increase when I add and say a paralegal and then an office staff? Does my rate go from 400 per hour to 600 an hour? How do I calculate that?
The guessing game of pricing. So typically, this is what I see. And it's so, for me, it's fascinating when I see it. I'm like, there are tools that can be used to help you actually figure this out without guessing. So what typically happens is, all right, I'm at $250 an hour. Let's just go back, especially if it's an hourly bill firm. But flat rate firms do the same thing, because let's say it's an estate planning firm and they are starting off with a package that's like, because it's just them, they might be like $1,500. Now they're adding staff and they realize, oh, wait, I need more. In fact, flat fee firms end up becoming Ponzi schemes unintentionally, because of the guessing game about how to price their services to be profitable and sustain growth. So what is the true cost? Let's work with an hourly bill firm. I'll use that as the example. If you have an hourly bill firm, right, and you're generating your revenue from that hourly bill rate that is billed to the client, there's a couple of things that happen. One, I have yet to meet a business that has a 100% collection rate. They never do, right?
Yeah.
Ever. And if I would love to meet the owner who does, because I think they would be the poster child for perfecting this.
Regardless of any type of business.
I agree, right? Yes. Well, tech subscription-based businesses would have 100% collection because you don't pay, it stops. Right? Like that's the only thing.
Right.
But that being said, let's just use the hourly bill firm. There are so many different costs that go into the employer. So you're hiring. So it starts off with the salary. We have the salary, and then we have the employer taxes. Then we have insurance. You're paying malpractice insurance. And then I'm going to ask for anybody else who's here, what are some of the other costs that you believe that an employer or a law firm owner has to pay for the staff that they hire? You could drop it in the chat, or you could unmute if they can. I would love to hear what everybody thinks, what else goes into that cost, because whatever you say, you're not going to get it all.
I just got a notice for somebody we hired in a new state, and I need workers' comp in that state. I need E&O in our line of business, but there's a lot more, I'm sure.
There is a lot more. So, yeah. But here's the thing. There's two types of costs. The hard costs that you literally have to write a check for, right? That E&O, that is a hard cost. Workers' comp, hard cost. Social Security, the taxes, hard cost. Here's the other costs that tend to not be calculated as a cost, but because it's a what you call that soft or hidden cost, which is there is a cost for the time that you give the employee off, PTO, sick time, and holidays. That's important. It's a hard cost because that actually affects the utilization for that you're paying for that employee. So you may be hiring this employee for 40 hours a week, and then you do all of your math and calculations based on 40 hours a week. And the good ones will say, okay, I give them 2 weeks off. So it's not 52 weeks a year, it's 50 weeks a year. And they might be like, okay, then I give them, holidays. So it might be 3 weeks off in the year, or maybe it's 4 weeks. So we'll use 4 weeks. Let's just say 4 weeks, generous. See, yeah. I got my soft cost. No, you didn't. Does the employee go to the bathroom? Does the employee sometimes take a personal phone call at work? Does the employee sometimes chit chat with their colleague? Now, those are actual costs that are not accounted for because this affects the utilization, the output you're going to be able to get from this person, which affects what you actually make from them and you get to keep as profit. Now, I go down to that level of granularity because as a business gets larger, that becomes very important because that is where profitability leaks and it's affected in the pricing. So there's also another cost, right? If you're looking at how to come up with pricing, and I'm going to show an Excel chart. I'm looking at the time as well. I'm going to show this table that I have that I use illustratively. In order for you to have employees, you support the employees. You pay other expenses, right? So the overhead, so that this employee can actually generate the revenue. That is called the overhead absorption rate. And you can calculate that as a ratio. For every dollar I spend on a salary for somebody to produce revenue, how much more am I spending to support the production of that revenue? And you can calculate that as a ratio. And I'm going to share this screen. Now, the true cost of an employee is called the labor burden ratio. I'm getting a little bit technical, but those two costs, if you have it done correctly, and I'm just going to use this as an example. I'm using really high salaries because, California, Bay Area, but we have Kermit, Miss Piggy, blah, 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 okay?
Yep.
The total annual cost here, right, is the actual hard costs. The labor burden rate includes utilization as well, and this number can change. So even though you might be hiring somebody for $40 an hour, not $40 an hour, I'm sorry, 40 hours a week, Are they actually working and expected to work 40 hours a week?
Right.
Are they billing 40 hours a week? The answer is usually no. So
Yeah,
in some
yeah.
firms, actually, it is. But
Mhm.
California is a little bit strict. But in many firms, they're working 70 hours. So their utilization is actually above. It's really, really, really crazy. So I'm just going to do this, right? So I can sit here and say, okay, what is the total annual cost, right? What is the actual annual, what is the hourly wage for this annual cost? And then what is the labor burden, right? How much more am I paying, right, in spend? And I do these calculations so that I can figure out what my, I'll come over here. This goes a little bit further. I can calculate, well, what is my break even? What is the break even? Meaning if I bill Ms. Kermit out anything less than $346 an hour, I'm at a loss. And it's different for each employee. Do you know why it's different for each employee, even if they have the very same role and the same compensation? Anybody can take a guess? Everybody gets different benefits. If you offer health medical benefits, their cost is different.
Right.
So somebody might be taking the most expensive benefits that you're paying for as an employer. So they cost more than their peer who's making the same salary.
Interesting. So
But
even
these things aren't normally like calculated. So even though the bill rate might be the same, the profit that I make would be different based on those factors. And I can see, am I actually going to make money or lose money on any individual person who is actually generating revenue? The overhead, and the reason you want to have the overhead absorption is because it's only the work of the revenue producers that's going to cover the cost of everything else it takes to support that the production of that revenue.
right.
So the break-even cost cannot be just the cost of that employee. You have to figure out what that ratio is, tie it into their cost. So now you actually know how much should I be charging in order for me to make a profit in this business based on how this employee works. Because guess what? You have some A players and C players. So some people, their utilization is going to be lower. That is not something you want to be guessing at. It's something you want to manage. But if you're not guessing at it and you put the right utilization, then you're actually having accurate numbers in which to predict, to forecast, again, to make better decisions about what's going on in the business. I can predict the revenue. I know I'm not going to collect 100% of it. I'm going to collect about 80% of it, right? That's average. Then I know where my revenue will land based on all of these factors. So these tools aren't utilized a lot by many attorneys because they went to law school. They went to law school and they don't realize. And so as they get bigger, they need the support of systems that allow them. It distills it for them. Like they're not going to go do calculations like that. They need somebody to hand it for them and say, hey, here are the numbers. They're accurate so that they can make better decisions in the business to be profitable as they're growing.
It's very interesting. And I have a follow-up question on one of the numbers I saw. So even the lowest hourly rate, which was for their salary, they might be at 29 and their cost to company was 93. The bill rate was still at 200. What's the delta between 93 and 200?
Are you talking about, let me see, 93? There was one who was really meaning, okay, you know why that margin is higher? Because that's a remote paralegal. So that's how you make decisions. Like if I hire a remote paralegal, this is what I'm paying monthly and it's a contractor. I don't have some of the expenses, which means I actually have a higher profit margin. Intellectually, a business owner knows that, but it's very different when you can see the numbers in black and white between a seasoned remote paralegal and an on-site paralegal who's a US citizen with tax obligations and benefits and all of that stuff. Right. So you can see where the margins are.
Okay. So based on, that was more based on where the possibility of margins is. That's
yes, awesome. Yes, that affects margins. It affects how you decide to staff your firm. And if you like the idea of remote staff, you have to have, it's even more important to have the systems and the technology to manage how the work is being done.
Right.
It becomes even more important because you're not on site for you to always see them. They might be in different time zones. For example, we have somebody who works for us. She's phenomenal. She lives in Kenya. You'd never know it though. You'd never know it unless she tells you that she lives in Kenya, because our systems are so tight that you'd never know that she's halfway around the world, right? And so we know the work that's being done. We can see inside the business. You can see what's going on in there. And so, these are some of the tools that's needed. Now, this again, right? I'm using Excel to calculate this, but some of the information and tools that's used, it's based on the technology within the business that already exists. Many businesses think they have to go and get every bell and whistle under the sun. They don't realize that the tools that they have give them a lot of information that could be optimized in making better decisions. All right. So, what you do when it comes to AI, you could even add AI to the tools you have right now to make it even better. Right. That just means you're optimizing what you already have.
This is fascinating, and I would love to go deeper, but let's switch gears since we have only 8 more minutes left. Let's talk about firms who have grown from this initial solo attorney to firms who might have doubled or tripled in size and then hit a wall. What typically causes that stall after rapid growth in your experience?
It's the culmination of all of these issues we pretty much just touched on. The stall comes from the firm actually needs the information from optimized utilization of the software that they have within the business. The firm needs to have people who understand how to optimize it to help run those systems and guide the people, and usually that's lacking. And so they're stalled because the firm has grown to the point at which they're utilizing their systems. That's basically what it is. It would have outgrown where the systems are, which is a problem because now there's a delta between how it's being operated and where the firm is trying to be, and things kind of break down. It's kind of like it's exceeded its load. So you could have a bicycle that's meant for one person, and the bicycle is probably not going to work as well if you put 5 people on it. That's basically what is happening unless you change the bicycle or you reduce the people, right, on it. So instead of a bicycle and you have 5 people to transport, you might need a car. Now, that is change. You're fundamentally, of course, changing the vehicle that's being used, right? I don't know how else, but technology just needs to be optimized, because in many instances, what happens is you may have a car and you just have everybody sitting. You have 5 people sitting in the front seat. And you're like, could you please optimize the use of this vehicle? 3 people could go in the back, which means you're now utilizing more of this vehicle you already have. That's usually what is needed in many of these businesses. Everyone is sitting in the front seat because that's where the driver was, and everyone comes in there and everyone sits there and like, hey, there's room back here. There's more stuff that can be done back here, right? That we don't have to be crowded and we don't break the system and distract the driver and top load the vehicle. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so many business, and this is not just law firms, right? It's almost any business. If they are open to optimizing, finding the people, finding the resources to fill the blind spots of optimizing the software that they have. And sometimes there are times when they need to actually change the software that they're using, get something better because it just is inefficient for where they are. That usually realigns the stagnation so that now it has space to actually continue growing. The systems, you cannot outgrow your systems. You will break, unfortunately. That it's a law. It's a business law. You cannot outgrow your systems. So if you want to grow beyond where you are and you keep hitting a wall, look at your systems. And if you do not understand your systems, hire the people that do. That's why you exist, right? You hire the people that do, that understand that. And so this is where I think, it's come full circle, like the experience that I've had where it was being able to find who is that unfindable person who can take this strategy to the next level, right? What is that resource that is needed in order for everything to work in the way that it needs to work? And so it's the systems and it's the people to drive the systems that will break any level of stagnation in any business, including law firms.
That's great. Yeah, what you just said about systems reminded me of a quote from this book, Atomic Habits. And the author says that
James Clear
says that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Always. It's Hands down. I read his book. I didn't remember that line, but it is true. That is exactly what it is. It's 100% what it is. And so that is why when I developed the the freedom framework, I'm sorry, it doesn't build the system for you. It allows you to see where you are so that you can then start making the plans for the systems you need to get you out of where you are. What the person needs who is in the drift zone is a little bit different from the person who is still in the grind zone. It's a little bit different. So you have to look back and say, well, where are you now? Okay, here's the focus that needs to happen. Do you have that in your firm right now? Yes? No? No? Okay. This is what you need. This is what you need to look for. And if you don't have it, now you have to hire it or bring it into your business so that it can be corrected so that you get unstuck from where you are.
Makes sense. We have last couple of minutes, so I'll ask you one last question, and we'll put out this content on YouTube and other channels. So for any firm owner who checks out this video, who feels busy, is successful on paper, but still stuck, what's the first action you would recommend?
I would first say go register for my masterclass at freedomframework.us. It's free. Shameless plug, right? It is free. There's no charge. Take the diagnostic. There is no charge for that. Or register for the masterclass. Because if you're stuck, if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, usually what happens is you don't know what you don't know. You have the business, you keep going back to what you have known and it's not working for you. You have a blind spot. And so therefore you're at that point where you have to seek out people and resources, right? Whether it's the YouTube videos here that's being put out, that's very, very valuable. I would say go back and look at some of the other videos in this series because you may find, hey, that's what I need, right? And that's what you can get in order to move your business forward. Check out, the freedom framework. Again, it's a diagnostic that kind of gives you this idea of, okay, I think this is where I am. How do I get what I need so that I could get to the next level?
That's great. That's great. This was awesome, Janelle. Thank you so much for spending the time and sharing such valuable information with us and our viewers. Really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you again, everyone, for attending. And we'll see you next month. Next month, we have a panel discussion where we'll have two attorneys who will talk about how their customers get wrong answers from ChatGPT and AI and how that can be used to grow their business. So do check that out, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.